getting into what I wanted to discuss today, the financial issues. Islamic finance is the big winner in this current economic crisis. And the San Francisco Chronicle has an article they put out an article this past week talking about Muslim investors and how they profited by adhering to their faith. It says, as credit markets have imploded, triggering a global economic crisis, Islamically correct investors have seen a change of fortune. The conservative principles this small group of devout Muslims clung to during the economic heyday has insulated them from the worst of the past year's suffering. Their renunciation of the interest-based economy kept them away from investments in financial services companies whose stocks have collapsed and out of traditional mortgages. There was a time a few years ago that Islamic finance was considered simply too conservative, said Professor Ibrahim Ward, author of Islamic Finance in the Global Economy and an adjunct professor at Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. Right now, many people are recognizing that maybe it's not such a bad thing. I told you about this a few months ago. I told you that I told you the reason for this economic collapse, which is riba. Everybody knows it. It's interest. Interest is a huge reason for this financial collapse, being buried in interest and doing these gambling type transactions on the stock market. It's pitiful. I told you the reason for it, and I told you who was going to save it and what principles were going to turn it around and how to avoid it. Yes, the Islamic financial system. I told you, I read you an article a few weeks ago that proved and showed that while all of these markets are in the dirt, and whilst investors are pulling their hair out, trying to figure out how to just stay afloat. And I told you, while all of that is happening in that horrible backdrop, the Dow Jones Islamic market indexes is booming, knocking Standard & Poor's out the box. It says here that the Dow Jones Islamic market indexes, which represent benchmarks for Islamically correct investment categories, have been outperforming their non-Islamically compliant counterparts by 3 to 4% in key indexes. The largest Islamic mutual funds in the country have the Amana Income and Growth Funds. This company has been outperforming Standard & Poor's 500 in the past year by 13 and 7%, respectively. Knocking them out the box. And I told you, some of y'all brothers with money need to start getting busy with this. This is our chance to show that standing up on principle and not trying to rape the system and manipulate the dollar and, change and fluctuate the interest based on a whim and getting involved in interest, period. Staying away from it, this is our chance to show that it can be profitable. People laugh at us and they say, how in the world can you maintain a non-interest-based bank? How in the world can you begin to deal in today's economy without interest? It's impossible. No, it's not impossible. It's impossible not to be somehow touched by it. That's impossible. But the way to decrease your chances of being raped by this current financial downturn is to stay away from it as much as possible. And here he says something that I disagree with. Ward and other Islamic finance experts and investors caution that the crisis doesn't mean that Islamic finance is a better model than Western capitalism. I totally disagree. How in the world can you say that it's not better when you're seeing the proof of it right in front of your face? You know what makes these markets implode, but you're not avoiding it. And also, I'll offer this subject onto another topic. I told you that the Muslim community has the power to completely save, to single-handedly save the auto industry. I told you before, at a few shows back, and I highlighted it, now I'm doing it again. Why don't the Muslims go to the doors of GM and Chrysler and Ford and all of these companies that are at the point where they don't know if they're going to survive for the next 6 months, and tell them, why don't you take another look at the Muslims? And even the people were making fun of it. They're making fun of it. They see articles like this, and all of these conservative commentators are commenting on it. They're saying, they're saying all we've got to do, they're saying, look at where the world is coming to. They're saying all we've got to do to save our economy is become Muslims, to convert. Just convert to be Muslim and change our whole system, and don't get involved in interest-based dealings, and don't steal money, and don't gamble the money on the stock market, and, do these high-risk, highway robbery on the stock market, and then we'll be successful. They're laughing about it. And they're saying, all they do is make the comment, and then they leave it alone. They don't analyze it. They don't tell you that the Dow Jones Islamic markets is knocking Standard & Poor's out the box. They don't tell you that the Muslims who have stayed upon principle in this issue have saved themselves from financial ruin. They don't tell you that. They just mention the story and leave it alone. But I told you before, why don't the Muslims go to these major auto companies and say to them, take another look at us? We can help you. Waive these interest payments, waive this charging of this interest, give us some interest-free transactions. Let's work out a plan. Let's work with collateral. Let's work with what they call takaful system, something like this, where you will have a kafil, someone who will promise to take care of your debt. Work with the Muslim finance companies. Get more involved in these Islamic finance companies that deal not only with investing, but also the lending of money. Get with us and work with us. Waive this interest charges for the Muslims on religious grounds, and watch your sales skyrocket. How many Muslims out there can afford a brand new car, but they don't buy it? Simply because if they enter into a car mortgage, basically it's a mortgage now. These cars cost about as much as houses. That it involves interest, and that's not allowed for us to do. So I told the people before, go knock on the doors of GM, go knock on the doors of Chrysler, go knock on the doors of Ford, especially where they're at. You Muslims in Detroit, where you make up a huge portion of the population in Detroit, Hamtramck, it's all Yemenis, Lebanese, Palestinians, Iraqis, crawling with them. You Muslims in New York, you Muslims in California, these huge populations, these huge pockets of Muslims in Chicago, why don't you go to the doors of these auto sellers, manufacturers, and tell them you got buyers if you work with us? We can single-handedly save the whole thing. I'm telling you, we'll be the champions of the United States financial comeback. We will be the people who end the recession and bring America back on the rebound. I'm trying to tell you, you're laughing at me, but if one person might take me seriously.